This is Tatu welcoming you to another Asian Agribees podcast. Today, our Philippine regional correspondent, Isa Q. Tan, talks to Lesley Mitchell of Forum for the Future to discuss about the sustainability challenges facing the animal protein sector and what could be the potential solutions. Ms. Mitchell is the Associate Director for Sustainable Nutrition at Forum for the Future, a sustainability nonprofit working in partnership with business, government, and civil society to accelerate the shift toward a sustainable future.
Hi, Lesley. Thank you for joining us today.
Great to be with you.
We know that the animal protein sector is considered a significant contributor to global greenhouse emission. However, many industries like these are crucial to national food security programs, and this is particularly true in Southeast Asia. Unfortunately, challenges continue to hound these industries here. What we'd like to discuss briefly with you are what these challenges are and perhaps delve deeper on the potential solutions. I understand that climate change is one of the biggest challenges, and let's zero in on the animal protein sector. What do you think are more specific and important challenges facing the animal protein sector in Southeast Asia?
I think if you're in the animal protein sector in Southeast Asia, you're in both one of the most challenging environments and one with the greatest opportunity. So we know that the vast amount of growth in food demand is going to come within the region. If we look at Malaysia, for example, since 1990, demand for meat and dairy has tripled, doubled in Vietnam in the same amount of time. And that is only going to continue both from the point of view of population growth and also economic growth. As people become wealthier, they tend to eat more meat. So there is an issue of demand, which sounds great if you're in the animal protein business, but you also have deep challenges with regard to not just climate change impacts. So 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from livestock. And so there is a key question there about how can you deal with that level of contribution? And actually food and agriculture will become the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions as we decarbonize over the next 10 to 15 years. The other key issue is around that wider question of sustainability. So for pork and poultry, animal feed is the biggest chunk of greenhouse gas emissions. And so what that food is and where it's coming from for animal feed is a huge issue in terms of the future of the planet. So soy has been singled out as one of the key areas of concern, and deforestation-free supply chains are going to be a significant issue for animal protein going forward. But I think the biggest issue is this question around the role of animal protein in diets and the potential for substitution of alternative proteins for animal proteins. Animal protein is in the spotlight, not just from the point of view of meeting the needs for food security, but really shifting environment where people are starting to make some very big decisions about changing what they eat. As we go through our conversation, we're really seeing huge amounts of resource going into agri-tech and alternative protein investment, for example. So it's a really changing dynamic space. There is something about the animal protein sector which is particular to the fact that you have sentient animals, and the issue of animal welfare has become a significant red line for people. So looking at the conditions in which animals are housed to produce meat and dairy is becoming a very significant issue. And finally, I think one of the most important for the future of the protein system is the issue of the role of farmers and the importance of the smaller farmer and family farmer economy across Southeast Asia. And I think one of the things that has really struck me in seeing the shift to really technically led landless protein production, such as fermenting vessels full of alternative proteins, is that it just doesn't address the issue of the importance, both in terms of food production and the economy, and particularly rural economies, of those smaller and family farmers. I think we're really keen within this to see what role they can play in the future of the protein system.
In your paper, you noted that there are many innovations in food production, including proteins now. And you mentioned that all these investments in agritech, but you pointed out also that the current trends are also raising significant questions. Can you detail what these questions are?
I think it's raising some big questions, particularly around land-based versus landless agriculture. And so we're seeing this massive investment going into alternative proteins. I think it was something like 423 million in 2019. But the question for me with that is, whilst it's focused on innovation and investment, and really, clearly will have benefit in terms of addressing issues of food security, is that being done in a way that understands the wider challenges that the region faces, not just from the point of view of nutrition and access to nutrition, particularly in rural communities, but also, as I said, the issue of livelihoods. But also as we build out, so if we look at, there's been a massive rise again in the scale of aquaculture and in animal production facilities, and particularly industrial animal production facilities. We're going into a period of massive disruption and volatility. And so one of the questions I have is, are these solutions going to deliver the kinds of social and environmental outcomes that are going to be required? Or are they actually going to hold in place business as usual that has got us in this trouble in the first place? The integration of farming systems with local communities and regions, and whether they can be part of that restorative and contribute to resilience. There is potential that if there is a significant shift in people's diets, that you could see large investments in agricultural, vertically integrated agricultural production systems being seen as redundant or stranded assets. So there are a range of those challenges, I think, that we face moving forward. And I guess the one thing that Forum for the Future is trying to do through this project is enable people across the food sector, the agriculture sector, the financial sector in Southeast Asia, to have the opportunity to see what it means for them. How are these challenges going to turn up for the region? What are the responses that are right for the region, and to support people within the region to co-create those approaches.
So this project of the Protein Challenge Southeast Asia is going to try and address those questions. What precisely do you hope to accomplish with the project? And are you following a certain timeline for it?
The Protein Southeast Asia project comes after Forum for the Future working on protein more widely, and particularly in Europe and the US, for the last 6-7 years, where we really worked hard to unpack what the challenges were within the protein system around all these things we've talked about already, climate and nutrition and so on. And that really looked at two key issues. One was around animal production and particularly sustainability of animal feed. And the other was around the rebalancing of diets. It was very much about bringing people together across the system to work out those challenges. Now those issues are mainstream. We've really seen the rebalancing of diets, this whole shift in alternative protein. So I guess what it's trying to do initially is really flag the signals of change that are coming and enable people to have a clear picture across the kind of operating environment that we're in Southeast Asia, to be able to see that and see where there is potential to work towards those goals of not just economic value, but also delivering the environmental and human and societal outcomes that we hope for. It would also deliver equitable value, for example, to farmers. So it would create business models that enabled small and family farmers, as well as largest, to participate in the market. But also it would enable that environmental regeneration that is so sorely needed. And it would, I think, as well enable the region to create its own solutions. So Protein Southeast Asia is that exploration.
So what is it that you can see for Southeast Asia?
What we're really recognizing is the potential in Southeast Asia to really design out those transformative approaches to the future. And so what we hope to do through this is explore those key signals, identify the challenges together that the system faces, and look at how you can create new ways of working, new business models, new financial flows, and so on that will support those shifts to happen.
What can we expect from the project in the coming years?
So over the next 2 years, we're hoping that bringing this Protein Challenge Southeast Asia project to bear will mean that we're able to convene people across the food sector, the agriculture sector, the financial sector, to really explore together this potential challenge and how to unlock more ambitious transformation that really does deliver against those societal, environmental, and economic goals. And so we're really calling for people who are engaged across the food and finance systems to come and be part of that process. There are 2 key things that we are going to be doing in the next 2 years. One of those is really bringing together what we call protein visionaries. So bringing together those really ambitious individuals who are motivated and interested to look at building out a future for the food system, protein system particularly, that is just and regenerative, and exploring new and innovative ways of designing out and prototyping some of those solutions. And then the second one is to really explore that question around small and family farmers and how you can create financial models that enable that broad swathe of actors upon which the region depends, not just for food, but as a huge part of the economic vitality of the region. And really look again at whether there is potential to build out models that will actually enable people to have equitable and just access and engagement with the market for building out a thriving future, and how can businesses grow and adapt and transform to enable those key outcomes. What we do at Forum is we bring the process together, and so we'd really love people to reach out to us, whether you work in finance and investment, whether you work in ESG, whether you work in in a major agribusiness, whether you're a representative of a community. We really want to hear from people across the system to engage in this conversation.
So how can the challenges be addressed?
One thing we've looked at are the kind of different mindsets and different ways of thinking about addressing the challenge of building out a future food system. And there are kind of two ways that we've identified, and this becomes relevant when we're talking about, building new business models and so on. And the first is really what we see people doing now, which is a real strong focus on kind of engineering. So let's call them protein engineers, but engineering for a future. So technically led innovation, building in efficiencies, building in these streamlined processes, really responding and incredibly importantly, responding to the big challenges of climate emergency and food security. But I think that effectively what they seem to do as well is they are still focused around profit maximization. And it's also often quite a kind of risk-focused, sort of minimizing risk kind of approach, which is really valuable, but isn't necessarily going to deal with those challenges that we have coming down the track. And so we are seeing some actors who we've called this protein visionary. Basically, it's people who are looking at that bigger vision or that bigger picture of the future and are willing to step out of a focus on, streamlining and efficiencies and so on. If we do want people to have thriving livelihoods and we want strong rural economies and we want sufficient protein production and we want a diverse protein system, for example, people to have the products that they want to choose, and we've tackled the climate, how does that system need to work? What does that system look like? And how are we designing it for those outcomes that are just and regenerative? And so it's just taking a slightly broader, bigger lens that looks to potential futures, not just solving the challenges that we have now, but looks through that vision to potential scenarios for how the food system could operate in future and what the financial models are that sit behind that and enable that to happen.
In that paper, you noted those possible future scenarios for the protein sector in Southeast Asia and how it could cut across various related sectors. Now, what could hinder or interfere with achieving these scenarios?
So in the work that we've done to date, we've looked at a number of different scenarios, and you could go on creating other ones, but let's just look at a couple of those. One of them might be that you have a very vertically integrated, highly efficient protein sector that is maximizing productivity and minimizing climate impact. But actually, at the same time, what you've done is create a system that removes smallholders and small farmers from that economy, or uses them as contract labor, and potentially created effectively something that lowers price to the extent that only those with the efficiencies of scale can participate in the market. So that might be one future for protein, and you might have a version that's an animal protein or an aquaculture protein or an alternative protein. Another vision might be we recognize the value of the diversity of proteins in the region, and we don't just have new innovation or growth of livestock sector, but we recognize that we actually have incredible diverse proteins and a diverse food culture that values and is capable of using those proteins in ways that people love to eat, and really values that diversity of production that enables everyone to have access to nutritious food, but does so in a way that is specific to the region and recognizes that diversity is important in the types of foods that are available. So they're very different scenarios. The things that I think could hinder a scenario reaching those key outcomes down the line are around that kind of narrow view of we're solving for one thing. We need to be able to see the whole bigger picture. We need to see the food system as a whole and how the dynamics of one actor will influence what happens for another. I think we also need to be really clear that the food system that we have now has been predicated on the need for maximizing productivity and profit, short-term profit. And that leads to consolidation. It leads to efficiencies, which are good, but it leads to consolidation, and it pushes those less capable out of the market. And it also requires, it's effectively being extractive in terms of impact on the land. So I think if we're not able to shift a mindset to recognize that we are actually part of nature, and if we don't get our heads around it, we are not going to last out the climate emergency. We're going to see further biodiversity breakdown, which will really affect, for example, crop productivity, and we won't be in a state of being resilient to the oncoming challenges that we face, which has huge potential for impacting food security, impacting social well-being and social stability. We recognize that Southeast Asia is such a place of potential, such a place of impact in terms of how the future is going to develop, and that hopefully we can bring our tools and skills as a sustainability nonprofit to allow the region to shine a light on itself and see where it has the potential to act and to really flourish.
Well, that's very interesting. And are you finding people that are seeing this in the same way that you are here?
Yes. So I think the approach we have seen today is very focused on the protein engineer mindset and around efficiency and technological solutions and really managing risk. I guess the thing that is interesting is this rise, particularly within the financial arena, the rise of ESG, so environmental, social and governance principles as a lens for investment. And really what that is around is risk management still, but is recognizing the interlinked risks of climate and environmental and social harm and poor governance as well, with the financial results of or consequences of a business. And so it's a really interesting new lens, but I think what this does is it takes it the next step further and says this isn't just an exercise to say, have you filled this carbon report? Have you managed those risks in your supply chain? To really saying, how do you contribute to that positive outcome? And we know we're in a state of huge innovation. So how do we really harness that and harness the power of financial flows into that area and the power of the growth in the region to really to enable those outcomes that we all want.
Okay, so it's really a collaborative and a participative effort.
Oh, totally. I mean, this is the idea behind the way that Forum for the Future works is that we support and enable others to see their potential for change. And so, the future isn't designed yet, and it's an opportunity for actors across the system. Whoever you are, if this sounds exciting, if this sounds interesting, then it's hopefully we've created a really amazing space to engage in that challenge.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today, Lesley. I really wish Forum for the Future the best of luck, especially for this protein challenge Southeast Asia.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you to all of your listeners for taking the time to hear this podcast. And really keen, come to forumforthefuture.org and see more about the protein challenge in Southeast Asia.
Forum for the Future's Protein Challenge Southeast Asia may seem a lofty goal, but with collaborative efforts among key players, it is achievable. Learn more by visiting www.forumforthefuture.org. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To keep up to date about Asia's animal protein industry, please visit www.asian-agribase.com. This is Hatu saying thank you and inviting you to our future podcast.